welcome to today's video. And in today's video, I'll be doing a 2024 election prediction between Donald Trump and Joe Manchin. I'm going to start by labeling all of Manchin's safe states. By the way, a lot of these states are really hard to call because of just the fact that these candidates are pretty strong with certain demographics. And it's a bit of a difficult prediction to make, especially in states like Pennsylvania. It can be a close call. Indiana, by the way, could be likely. Manchin could do better with the working class, and it could slip down to likely. For Manchin's likely states, he gets Colorado, New Mexico, Maine at large, and Virginia. Trump gets Alaska, Kansas, Montana, and South Carolina. So, in Colorado, I don't see Manchin getting the support from Hispanic and Latino voters that he would need. I don't see him getting enough turnout that he would need from Denver, and I just don't see him doing well enough with the rural voters that they're going to make up a larger part of the electorate that Trump's going to turn out to be able to move it up to safe. New Mexico, once again, not enough strength with Hispanic and Latino voters, but he will probably be fairly strong with oil workers. In Virginia, Manchin's not great for black voters. He's not great for D.C. suburbs, whereas Trump is good for the rural vote. So it'll probably end up being only D+6 or D+7. Maine at large is pretty. It doesn't seem to shift much. It tends to stay. It tends to be a Democratic state. It's strange. It's almost like Nevada. Or it actually is very much like Nevada in the sense that it doesn't really shift. It tends to be more competitive, but it tends to be competitive it tends to go to the Democratic Party fairly consistently, but by fairly consistent small margins. So it is very strange, much like North Carolina, for the GOP, very inelastic. But I do see Manchin being able to carry it. I don't see him having a whole lot of support from the white rural college educated voters. So it'll probably slip down to me like D+7 or D+6, but it is going to be likely nonetheless. For Trump's likely states, Montana, Manchin's just going to do better with moderate to Montana. Montana tends to like more moderate candidates. Trump barely carried it safe against Biden. I think that Manchin will be able to get more crossover support, or not necessarily crossover to the GOP, but more crossover to moderates, I guess. In Kansas, Manchin's not going to be. He's not a great candidate for the suburbs, and whatever urban areas Kansas may have, he won't be able to turn out enough voters there. It will probably still be likely. It could easily be safe. I just see him doing well enough, and the suburbs continuing to shift to the left that it's very similar to 2020, given Trump's high rural turnout. In Alaska, Manchin's actually not great. I don't think for Native American voters, especially. As we see Native American voters turn out at higher rates, it's going to favor the Democratic Party regardless. But he's not a great candidate for Native American voters. But I do see him being better for oil workers. In South Carolina, Manchin's not great for the black vote. Trump is really good for the white rural vote, so Trump's probably going to carry it by 12 or 13. Possibly 14. For Manchin's lean states, he gets Minnesota, Nebraska second, and New Hampshire. So for Manchin in Minnesota, he's gonna probably do pretty good with the working class, probably do better, but I just don't see him getting enough turnout from Minneapolis. And I just don't see him doing terribly well in the suburbs. I think that one of Manchin's biggest problems will be turning out these bases that he needs. A lot of these bases in a lot of these big cities that really make up a lot of the Democrats' vote share that he would need to turn out, and I think it's going to have a lot of trouble with that. There's going to be enough anti-Trump turnout, though, that it's still going to be D+3. Nebraska's second. Manchin, one thing, won't be able to turn out enough voters in Omaha and the parts of Lincoln that fall under the second district. But he's going to do well enough in the suburbs to be able to carry it by roughly 3%, maybe 2, maybe 4. Something in that general area. In New Hampshire, Manchin is not going to turn out enough of the more. Obviously in New Hampshire, since it's 90% white or something, the white vote is fairly liberal. But I don't see him being able to turn out a lot of these liberal white voters that voted for Biden. And I don't think it's going to be quite like 2016, but I don't think it's exactly going to be 2020. I think it's probably going to be like D+4. For Trump's lean states, oh, by the way, Texas should have been likely. Manchin's not going to turn out enough voters in a lot of these bigger cities. He's not going to do very well with the Hispanic and Latino vote, whereas Trump is, he might shift the suburbs a little bit to the left as well, but it's not necessarily going to be a lot. Whereas Trump is going to be able to retain a lot of rural turnout, which is obviously a strong point. But I think he's honestly, he could do better with the Hispanic and Latino vote, given the fact that Manchin is really, really weak. Honestly, across the board, except for with like the working class, that's basically the only areas where he's strong. And with rural voters, he's decent in with like ancestral Democrats in the South. But I don't necessarily know that ancestral Democrats in the South are going to be the Democrats' path to victory in the South moving forward. So I don't see him doing very well in the state of Texas, especially given the fact that Trump's already going to do really well in rural Texas. For for Trump's lean states, he will get Iowa, Ohio, Florida, and Maine second. Honestly, North Carolina could easily be lean. In Iowa and Ohio and Maine second. Manchin's just going to be able to do better with rural voters, with all these Trump, or with all these Obama and Trump voters, all these voters that are looking for that populist messaging. He's going to have more appeal to them, but he's not going to be able to turn out enough voters, especially in Ohio, in a lot of these bigger cities, which is going to hurt him. Probably the most in Ohio, but he's still going to lose them by lean margins. In Florida, Trump is too strong with the Hispanic and Latino vote against a candidate like Manchin, and Manchin doesn't really have much strength in a state like Florida. He's not really strong anywhere, especially against someone like Trump. Against like Mitt Romney, he might have more strength because Romney has like no appeal to the working class. But against someone like Trump, who has loads of appeal, it's really going to be detrimental for Manchin in the sense that he just doesn't have much appeal across the board. Once again, especially with someone like Trump. For for the tilt states, Manchin gets Arizona, Arizona and Michigan, whereas Trump gets Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Pennsylvania could go both ways. We'll talk about that in a minute. In Nevada, Trump is going to be able to get a lot of rural turnout, whereas Manchin's not going to be very strong with the Hispanic and Latino vote, and not going to be able to turn out enough Hispanic and Latino voters. What little working class presence there is in Nevada, Manchin might be able to do decent with, but it's not going to be enough to be able to carry the still. Probably nearly lose. I could see it going to Manchin, though. In Arizona, Manchin is going to do really bad with the Hispanic and Latino vote, but he's going to be able to do well enough in Arizona's moderate suburbs to narrowly carry it. In Georgia, Trump's going to get enough rural turnout, whereas Manchin's going to do really bad with the black vote and not be able to turn out a lot of black voters and not do very amazing. He's not going to do amazing in the suburbs. Biden was one of the stronger Democrats in the suburbs. Stacey Abrams in 2018 was one of the stronger Democrats in the suburbs. Warnock and Ossoff, while they both weren't amazing in the suburbs, yeah, Manchin is just, not a good candidate at all in the suburbs. And he just doesn't really have appeal in a state like Georgia. It's a very similar thing in North Carolina. North Carolina and Georgia are very similar in their demographics, except for, first off, North Carolina's working class presence North Carolina has a larger working class presence. The type of working class presence that we see in a state like Wisconsin. But it also is more conservative. I think that Manchin actually would probably lose it by a smaller amount than Georgia, because he would be able to do slightly better with that working class, but he just doesn't have Trump's going to retain a lot of rural turnout. Whereas Manchin doesn't have much appeal to black voters, and he doesn't have a whole lot of appeal in the suburbs. In Wisconsin, Manchin, once again, doesn't have a whole lot of appeal to black voters, but he also doesn't have a whole lot of appeal to the working class against someone like Trump. It'll probably go to Trump by similar margins to Clinton, or to how much Clinton lost. Just because, if Clinton had the support among the working class that Manchin does in the 2024 scenario, she would probably narrowly carry Wisconsin because she has the ability to keep a lot of turnout in a city like Milwaukee and cities like Madison. Whereas Manchin just doesn't. He doesn't really have the. I don't think he really has the ability to energize a base. Um, or especially against someone like Trump, where what little support Manchin would have would likely not matter because Trump would have a lot of appeal in those areas as well. Michigan, very similar thing. Manchin's just been able to retain enough turnout from Detroit and just well enough for the working class to nearly carry it. Pennsylvania, this is a hard call, and I mean, it basically decides the election. But, because, I mean, whoever wins Pennsylvania wins. If you give this to Manchin, then he wins. But, looking at this, I mean, like, Manchin is going to do decent with the working class, but I think that he's going to be able to, I don't think he's going to be able to turn out enough voters in a lot of these cities. In Philly, in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh is a bit different. He doesn't have a whole lot of appeal to the working class. He has appeal, but not against someone like Trump. Or not as much. He's gonna have narrow improvements probably, but it probably won't be enough. Especially given the fact that he just won't be able to turn out voters. Which is gonna be a big problem for Manchin. So it's probably gonna nearly go to Trump. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like below. Stay tuned for the next video tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.